We are back for the Osceola's FSU versus Miami edition of the Nole Your Enemy Scouting Report. My guest today is the publisher of the rival site, Kane Country, Marcus
Kane
Benjamin.
County.
Kane County. I'm sorry. Kane County. Marcus Benjamin. Marcus, first of all, thanks for joining us. We know it's a busy week as we get ready for, I believe, the 67th renewal of one of college football's greatest rivalries as 5-3 Florida State travels to 4-4 Miami. Huge implications in this game on the recruiting trail, bowl hopes for both teams. And we'll dive into a little bit of the the offense and defense details as we move forward. But first of all, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. I think a lot of FSU fans would like to hear your opinion on, they transitioned from Manny Diaz to Mario Cristobal as the head coach last offseason. What are some of the biggest differences you see in the program, and kind of what is the temperature in Miami, who obviously started as a top 25 preseason team and kind of fell on some hard times once they got past week 2 of the season?
Well, overall, structurally, it's just a better program. It feels like a well-oiled machine now because the guys that Cristobal brought in are professionals. Let's just say that compared to some other guys they brought in previously in different regimes. I mean, to bring in guys like Kevin Steele, who has a boatload of experience and was a head coach at a couple of different places, as well as Charlie Strong, who was a coach at a couple of different places as well. It's just there's just a different feel of the program, and Miami's really killing it in recruiting, as you know, Pat. I mean,
yes.
They're top 10 in recruiting right now on the rivals teams rankings, number 7 for the moment, and who knows, by this time next week they could go even higher. But that's kind of the biggest difference so far, is just the impact of recruiting for this Cristobal staff. Now, once the season got going on, some things didn't go quite as planned. I don't think anybody saw that loss to Middle Tennessee State coming. There were a couple of surprises this season that you weren't expecting. And Tyler Van Dyke regressed a bit earlier in the season. He seemed to come back, and then he gets injured in the Duke game. So they're dealing with depth issues is what's really going on. They're not a deep team by any stretch. They're still a relatively young team. And it's going to take a while until we actually say the U is officially back. But like Cristobal says, they're just back to work. They're really just trying to get back to the days of the pictures behind us. They're trying to get back to those glory days. And it's going to take a while. But Hurricanes fans are not really patient, and they're very unforgiving, so it's going to take a while for them to get back. And Hurricanes fans have to be patient because it's going to be a process.
Well, that was one of my questions you already answered. I was going to ask you why you thought there had been, with such huge expectations coming into the season, you find yourself 4-4. I think most Canes fans thought they would be around 6-2 or better at this point in the season. And that was my question was, hey, do you think this is inexperience, injuries, lack of depth? And it sounds like it's a little bit of everything.
Yeah, it is a little bit with experience, definitely lack of depth. We lost our top receiver in Xavier Restrepo, and we were struggling to find a guy to really kind of jump out as that main guy for Tyler Van Dyke, because he misses his roommate. He did come back last week on limited reps, but to be without that guy X for a while, what has really hurt the team. But now Kobe Young has kind of jumped in to the fray to really kind of add to the list of playmakers that they do have. But yeah, this is a relatively young team. Your 2 starting safeties are sophomores. Your 2 starting defensive tackles are sophomores. A lot of freshmen are getting time, like Wesley Basaint and Nigel Kelly. You had a true freshman starting at right guard last week in Inez Cooper.
Yep.
You had Ja'Kai Clark, your starting center, go down, which caused you to put Jonathan Dennis in there, who's an underclassman as well. So it's just been a struggle to kind of put the pieces together with the injuries this season.
Well, I want to go back to the quarterback situation. I did listen to Mario's press conference on Monday or Tuesday. I believe it was his Monday presser where he said that he is preparing 3 quarterbacks to play in this game, including Tyler Van Dyke, obviously Jake Garcia, and then he's mentioned that he will play Ja'Cory Brown in this ball game, the true freshman who I believe has only thrown about 3 passes this year. I think they were all against Virginia, but has made some plays with his leg. Number one, are you expecting Van Dyke to start? Number 2, how when he does not start? Obviously, Jake Garcia struggled against Virginia, 15 of 31 against Virginia. He's 47 of 78 for the season. But just talk a little bit about what you anticipate Mario doing at quarterback on Saturday night.
Well, I think Tyler Van Dyke's going to be a game time decision. He suffered what it seemed to be maybe a shoulder injury. They've been very hush on what exactly the injury is to him, but from what I seen, it seemed like a shoulder injury, and those injuries don't usually heal very quickly. So I think he's going to be a game time decision. We'll see what happens. He's getting reps in practice this week, but I suspect that it is going to be Jake Garcia. But I think if TVD is 80%, I think he'll start because Miami's best chance to win is to have TVD under center.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean they're the 22nd best passing offense in the nation. As even with the struggles they've had this year, obviously we saw a drop off in pass production. Well, Garcia looked like he was going to light the world on fire against Duke early on, and then of course they had all the turnovers, and then of course Virginia's fairly good defensively and really kind of has a really defensive struggle. So and what about Ja'Cory Brown? I'm just fascinated because Mario did kind of point blank said this kid's playing. What do you think the reason for them trying to work him into the game is?
Well, he has been worked into a few games this season already in different packages. He's mainly used as, like a running type of quarterback. He threw his first passes, I believe, or completed his or attempted his first pass like last week against Virginia, but I think he's just going to be a situational type of quarterback. So he'll pop in every now and again, likely to kind of just throw Florida State's defense off balance.
Okay. Yeah, make him honor the extra runner, have to fill an extra gap type of thing. And I figured that the way I read it is he'll probably get more reps if Garcia's starting and playing as opposed to Van Dyke. Do you see it that way?
No, it definitely will not be that way. I don't think Ja'Cory Brown is quite ready to be the quarterback for the Miami Hurricanes as of yet. He's just a true freshman. He was just in high school last year. Jake Garcia has been with the program for a couple of years now. So it's definitely going to be Jake Garcia over Ja'Cory Brown.
Oh, no, I was just saying I think Brown will play more if Garcia is the quarterback than he would if Van Dyke was the starter, right? I mean, I'm just saying that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I think it'll be equal as far as if Tyler Van Dyke plays or Jake Garcia plays. Okay. I think either way, Ja'Cory Brown will likely make appearances.
Now, obviously, Josh Gaddis is the offensive coordinator for Miami this year. I believe it's it's a spread, shotgun, pro style offense. Probably similar to last year. But do you see any differences scheme wise, play calling wise? Are they doing anything different that you've noticed from one year to the next?
Yeah, I mean, this is a totally different offense from last season with Rhett Lashley. Rhett Lashley ran a spread offense, kind of a quick game, quick passing type of offense, really got guys in space to make plays. Tyler Van Dyke thrived in that offense. That's why he, was able to go on a tear towards the end of last season. This season is more of a balanced type of offense. The coaches call it a power spread, where it does have some spread elements to it, but there is an emphasis on just really having a power run game. So the running game is definitely utilized a little bit more, or the success of the offense is predicated to that run game. So it's a little different, but still very creative as far as the different packages, like we just alluded to with Jakari Brown being utilized, and Gaddis has shown different wrinkles of the offense throughout the season. I'd like to see a little bit more creativity for this offense, but we'll see. We'll see. Maybe he's saving that for FSU.
Yeah. Listen, it looked early on in the season like Miami was going to be able to run the ball successfully. 305 yards against Bethune, 174 against Southern Miss, 175 against a vaunted Texas A&M defensive front that was thought to be one of the better teams in the country. And then come out of the next 4 games, really, and don't run the ball with much success at all. 60 yards against Middle Tennessee, 42 against North Carolina, 107 against Virginia Tech, then 48 against Duke. Then, of course, I think they got over 100 yards against Virginia. But what has kind of been the struggle as they've moved on deeper into the season in the run game?
Well, I alluded to it earlier. It's really those injuries to that offensive line. When you lose your starting center, I mean, they're the quarterback of the O line, and when you lose a guy like that, it's gonna cause some struggles in the run game and in the pass game as well. They lost also Justice Olawusin, their starting guard as well. So he is not set to come back anytime soon. His injury is significant. And then they tried to have Jonathan Dennis also fill in, and he's also injured as well. He possibly could be back for this game, but it's really been the injuries. And like I said, there's a lack of depth on this team. And I think the reason for the struggles has been just the injuries to the offensive line. They had some injuries to the running backs as well. Jalen Knighton has been out for a couple of weeks. Should be back to play this week. And then Don Chaney was out for the beginning of the season. Maybe could possibly come back later. From what I hear, not expected to return in this game, but could make an appearance later this season. And then they lost their freshman, Trevante Citizen. We've heard a lot of great things about him as well, and he was gone before the season started. So he was already behind the 8 ball there with the run game, but I think they found something with Inez Cooper, the freshman, surprisingly, and I think he can help the run game this Saturday.
Yeah, Mario pointed him out in his press conference on Monday about how well he had played, particularly for a true freshman. Moving in, you mentioned the backfield. Henry Parrish has kind of carried the majority of the workload. 113 carries, 569 yards. That's about equal if you took Thad Franklin, Jalen Knighton's stats. They about combined, they're about where Henry is. But just talk about what kind of player Henry Parrish is and how he's played this year.
Henry Parrish is a straight dog, man. He runs hard. He's for a small guy, he's a physical runner, and he's very patient, and he has good vision as well. I mean, this is a kid that I've been watching in high school at Miami Christopher Columbus High School down here in South Florida, and he was always my favorite back, even when he was, being compared to like the Jalen Knightons of the world, and also the Don Chaneys of the world at Belen and Deerfield Beach. Henry Parrish has kind of low-key been the MVP of this offense because he is the most consistent running back, and we've kind of heard that from the coaches in the press conference this week, that he's been most consistent for the Hurricanes. And That's what you're going to get from him. You're not going to get likely a big explosive run, but he's going to hurt you with big chunk plays like 8 yards here, 9 yards there, 7 yards here. And he kind of wears defenses down as the game goes on.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned Jalen Knight had kind of been dinged up a little bit. I know that he's a name that we're familiar with in Tallahassee because he was committed to Florida State at one time. What kind of season is he going to? Do you think he'll be available Saturday? And I know that Mario was asked why he did not get a carry against Virginia. Was he available against Virginia?
From what I understand, he was available. They just decided to go with the hot hand in Henry Parrish. And like I said, he's been most consistent. The thing about Jalen is that he's had some issues with fumbles. He's had fumbles this season, and I think they purposely kind of sat him out for this game because of that reason. I do think he will make an appearance in this game. They would want his explosive ability to just kind of be a threat during this game. I think he will get in there along with Thad Franklin as well. I think Henry Parrish is definitely has the ability to carry the team with just toting the rock and 18, 19, 20 times, but you kind of don't want to do that to an already small back. You want to keep him fresh, and it would behoove the Hurricanes to use other backs in this game and for the rest of the season.
Yeah, and Jalen Knight's a weapon out of the backfield in the pass game too. He's been very good at that since he's been at Miami. Kind of reminds me a little bit of our guy Lawrence Toafili, who can do a little bit of everything. But all right, so moving on to the receiving core, you got one of the best tight ends in the nation, Will Mallory, who's got 28 catches. The Miami offense has 4 guys with over 23 catches, and then there's a little bit of a drop off after that. I believe the next guy is Michael Redding with 14 or 13. But anyway, just talk a little bit about the receiving core and who the top playmakers are on the outside for Miami.
Well, the guy that emerged this season is Colby Young. Colby Young is a JUCO transfer from the Northeast, and he has really emerged as wide receiver 1, surprisingly. I don't think a lot of people were expecting that, except for myself. I would said that on my stories on CanesCounty.com, Twitter Spaces or whatnot, that I was excited about this kid, and he finally started to get some run against North Carolina, and has been in the lineup and making catches ever since. Xavier Strepo is back, so he is going to be a guy that will be utilized as well. He is a gritty slot receiver that can make all of the tough catches. So expect to see him in the lineup this Saturday. And then you mentioned Will Mallory has been also very consistent as well. The senior tight end has been, one of the pillars of this offense, and he will be relied upon to make plays in this game. He had some cases of the dropsies this season, but he seemed to have corrected that. So I think those are your 3 main pass catchers to look out for in this game.
So Florida State's been pretty good on defense this year. It's played better and better as the year has gone along. How do you see Miami attacking Florida State's defense, particularly with Fabian Lovett back at defensive tackle for Florida State? Jared Verse looks to be healthy, healthier than he's been in quite some time. So Florida State's deeper than they've been on the defensive line in a long time. You mentioned the young offensive line that's kind of beat up for Miami. How do you see Josh Gaddis attacking Adam Fuller's defense?
I'd like to see Gaddis spread things out because this is a very fast, physical defense. They played pretty well this season, so I'd like to see him really kind of get guys in space, like Xavier Restrepo, like I said, get him in space, or Rashard Smith, get him in space as well to kind of make plays, to really kind of open up that running game, because once that running game gets going, then you can start to take some deep shots downfield. But I'd like to see them really kind of get some screens going, get some bubble screens going, some short, quick slants, some out routes, just some easy throws, especially if it's Garcia in there. I kind of want to see him get going with some short throws to really get him comfortable in this game, and then once he does that, then he can start to take some deep shots downfield. But definitely getting some guys in space is what I would like to see.
All right. Of course, Miami's calling card over the years has been a physical, aggressive defense, and you've mentioned it already. You've got Kevin Steele. There's the defensive coordinator, a name that most Florida State fans are familiar with, as he was in Tallahassee with Coach Bowden for a little while, and has been numerous places around college football, including Auburn of late. Listen, 22nd in rush defense, a little bit not so good against the pass, 65th in the nation against the pass, but 32nd in total defense. Really, the sign of normally a good Miami defense is they get a lot of pressure, disruptive plays, 5th in the nation in sacks made, 19th in the nation in tackles for loss. So really kind of hit and miss for Miami on defense this year. But what's your overall thoughts of Kevin Steele's 4-2-5 defense, and kind of what are some of the characteristics of that defense?
Well, I think the strength of this defense is on the defensive line. I think the two defensive tackles, the young ones that I mentioned, and Daryl Jackson and Leonard Taylor, are really coming into their own. And Akeem Mesidor and Mitchell Agude and Jafari Harvey, those defensive ends to me are could start probably at a number of different programs around the country. I think the defensive back are relatively young, especially when we're talking about the safety position. You're talking about Cameron Kitchens and James Williams that are true sophomores. They've got a lot of playing time last year as freshmen, but they still are sophomores. But the sky's the limit for those two guys. And then you got surprisingly for Hurricanes fans is an old reliable, which is DJ Ivey. I think DJ Ivey has been a reliable cornerback this season, aside from maybe two big plays that he's given up this year. I think he's really been a reliable corner for the defense. Now, linebacker has been kind of, it hasn't been the days of old for the Hurricanes, and they're learning this season, and they're learning really to play the position better with young guys like Wesley Basaint in there, and Keontre Smith has gotten a lot of playing time, but Corey Flagg is pretty much the leader of that core. But I think at linebacker is where you really want to see some elevation at that position, especially in this game, trying to corral Jordan Travis.
Yeah, that'll be a challenge for sure. But you mentioned, listen, the defensive ends and defensive line. You just look at their stat lines. The Mesidor kid, first of all, he's fifth in the team in tackles of 25, 8 tackles for loss, 5 sacks. You mentioned Agundi, who doesn't even start, but has 6 tackles or combined tackles for loss, sacks. Harvey, 5.5 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks. So they are doing a good job of getting pressure. So that will be a challenge, I think, for Florida State's offensive line. But you're right, they are impressive up front. Flagg's having an outstanding year, leads the team in tackles for losses, 9.5. So he's being disruptive. Then you go back to the secondary. Listen, you don't have a tremendous amount of starts there. Is that part of the struggle? It looks like, I believe Ivey's he's the most experienced with 28 starts, but you've got Williams, who's second on the team with 32 tackles. James Williams. Just talk a little bit about their safeties, Williams and Kitchens.
Outstanding. Both of them are outstanding young talents, but they're young, and so they're going to make mistakes, and they have made mistakes this season. But you could argue that those two are the most valuable players of the defense. You could argue that. I personally wouldn't say that. I'd probably say, Leonard Taylor or Akeem Ezador. But some people would say Cam Kitchens is the MVP of this defense, and for him to be in that conversation at with him just being a sophomore says a lot about his play. And then James Williams is a guy that they've used in a linebacker role, and he likes playing close to the box. Also can play deep in coverage. 5-star talent coming out of South Florida here, American Heritage High School. The sky's the limit for him as well. Uh, can really be a difference maker when it comes to causing turnovers as well. He's just an aggressive player. And back to Kitchens, I think Kitchens is a really smart player. He is definitely the eyes of the back of that defense. And, Kitchens is definitely a guy I'm really high on for the future.
Well, listen, Florida State's got a high, they make a lot of big plays, chunk plays in the passing game. Miami could have their hands full with Johnny Wilson, Ja'Kai Douglas, Micah Pittman, Lawrence Tofili in the pass game. Even the tight ends, Cam McDonald has been a threat down the seam vertically here of late. How aggressive has Kevin Steele been with blitz packages from the second and third level? And with Florida State's success in the passing game, it's kind of two-headed, right? You got to stop the guys on the outside. Florida State has been very productive in making big plays. You also got to stop the quarterback, who's one of the most dynamic playmakers in all of college football. How aggressive has Kevin been with blitz packages from the second and third level, and how do you see him attacking Florida State given their offense this season, which has been very successful?
I think it's been moderate. I think we came into the season thinking it was going to be more blitzing going on with this defense, but it's been moderate. I think at times, yes, he is aggressive, and I think he kind of picks and chooses the right times to be aggressive. But like I said earlier, that defensive line is already causing a pretty good pass rush, so the need to blitz is not necessarily always needed in past situations. And I think Miami's defensive line is good enough to rush the quarterback with four guys, and to also kind of curb the rushing attack of the quarterback. You kind of want to keep a guy and spy, and that's what they did last week as well.
Against Armstrong?
Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
They after a couple of QB runs kind of gashed them. They kept the guy back there, just kind of spying the quarterback. And I suspect that's going to be the same strategy.
Did they use a linebacker flag? Was that Flag or Smith, or who did they feel like was athletic enough to do that?
They used a variety of guys. So sometimes it would be Flag, sometimes it'd be a defensive lineman, Nigel Lee Kelly, the freshman. So they use a variety of guys. Sometimes it's James Williams, like I mentioned, who's coming down from safety. So they use a variety of guys to kind of spy on the quarterback.
All right. Well, it is Miami, Florida State, so we do have to talk about special teams. Listen, you got a really good punter in Headley and a really solid place kicker in Bargalis. He's 14 of 17, I believe 14 of 17 for the season, and of course Headley's averaging over 43 yards per punt, which is no surprise there. He's got a heck of a strong leg. But just talk about maybe. We know those guys, they've been around for a while, but just talk about their ability to cover both of the punt and the kick. And then obviously, how aggressive are they in the return game and kickoffs and punt return game?
Special teams has been solid for the Miami Hurricanes this season. I would argue that they have the best special teams unit in the ACC. Borregales, who's been pretty solid. He had a couple of misses in the Texas A&M game, but last week, going 4 for 4. I mean, you can argue he was the MVP of that game. And Lou Headley, I think, is going to be an NFL prospect. his, kind of rugby Australian style. Of course, he is from Australia.
Yep.
Style of punting is something that he thrives in. And I think he's been a difference maker, especially in that last game against Virginia, really kind of, flipping the field with field position. I think they've been really solid in that area and also in coverage as well. They haven't really given up any big plays in the return game. And as far as returners, you've kind of had a different variety of guys to kind of be back there to return. You've had Rashard Smith. You had Keyshawn Smith actually run a kickback this season. And that was
the linebacker.
Keyshawn Smith. I mean, for him to run a kickback was huge for the Hurricanes. So you have him as a threat, and then Rashard Smith, who many would argue is probably the fastest player on the team, back there as well. And then now in punt return, you've got Jacoby George, who was out with an injury for some of this season with a thumb injury, but now he is Mr. Reliable back there, returning punts. You usually had Xavier Restrepo back there, but they're limiting his snaps, and he may be back there for Florida State, but I think they're pretty comfortable with Jacoby George at punt return.
Yeah. Now, what kind of it's Miami, Florida State, so I can only imagine. Unfortunately, I've never been to a Florida State Miami game on the road. I've always gone to them here in Tallahassee. But
same for me. I've never gone to a Florida State Miami game on the road, but I've been to several here in Miami.
So, we expecting a sellout on Saturday night?
Yeah, of course. This is always the biggest game of the year. It's always going to be a sellout. It's always going to be a raucous crowd environment. It's going to be exciting for all fans and viewers on television, as well as recruits watching.
Yeah. Now, what kind of weather are we anticipating?
I think it's going to be clear. I haven't really looked into exactly what the weather will be.
It's Miami, so there could always be a rain shower.
Right, exactly. Weather in Miami changes, every 5 minutes. It's very bipolar. The weather.
I usually include that in part of my written scouting report, and I have not looked up the weather yet myself. So I was hoping maybe
I just looked it up right now, and it's going to be partly cloudy, around 80 to 70 degrees. So that sounds very typical Miami.
Yeah. Now the odds makers have Florida State as a 7.5-point favorite. The last time I looked, you think that's a fair line for this game? And kind of how do you see, I'm not going to ask you to give a prediction, how do you see this game playing out in what has been an unpredictable rivalry?
Yeah, I'm not surprised at the line at all, because Florida State has been pretty competitive in every game this season. I mean, aside from the Clemson game where it kind of got away from them, and then a couple of late scores in that game kind of made that score closer than the game probably was. But for the most part, I mean, I think they probably should have won that game against NC State. They were, a couple of plays away from really making that game close against Wake Forest. And, they've just been, and then that game against LSU, and the LSU is turning out to, based on what the rankings show from last night, is a pretty decent team.
Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry. No, go ahead and finish.
No, I was going to say the Georgia Tech game to me I think could be a reason why that line is so big, because they, kind of blew the doors off of Georgia Tech, but at the same time they weren't playing with Jeff Sims, and I think that Georgia Tech team is a different team without their quarterback at the helm. So I think this is going to be closer than the experts think with that 7-point line, but I'm not surprised at it at all.
Yep. Yeah, listen, I think Georgia, you mentioned Georgia Tech. I think they might have found a pretty good quarterback in that true freshman who'd never taken a snap. So, listen, I think it's going to be a crazy game. I have not gotten to the point where I'm ready to make a prediction yet. I'm still in the middle of breaking everything down. But, yeah, listen, it's a fun game. It's a game that we all look forward to each year. And, it's out of all Florida State's rivalry games, which are Clemson, Florida, and Miami, this is my favorite. This is the one I get most fired up for. So I cannot wait for Saturday night. I think it's going to be an outstanding game, as they always are. And Marcus, I just want to thank you for your time today. We appreciate you jumping on. And if there's anything we can do to help you guys down at Kings County, please let us know.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. This was fun. Should be a fun game. I think this game's going to turn out like how it always does. It's going to be close. I think vengeance is on the Hurricanes' minds from last year's debacle, and I think the Hurricanes are going to be ready to play in this one.
Well, I do want to have one last question before I let you go. A lot of times when you have a first-year head coach, you really don't see the best version of that team early. Do you think this is a team that's improving week by week under Cristobal?
I'm glad you asked that question, because I do feel like this is a team that is improving. I think it's always something. Every week it seems like there's always something that could be fixed. And the 1 week against Virginia Tech, they had 17 penalties. The 1 week against Duke, they had 8 turnovers. And then you lose your quarterback against Duke in that game. I think Miami has yet to put a complete game together to really show everything that is this Miami Hurricanes football team.
Well, we would certainly appreciate it if they could wait another week before they do that. So we'll do that against somebody else. All right, Marcus. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you down in Miami on Saturday night.
All right. Thanks for having me again. Have a good one, man.